Jaime from Inky&Scrappy, back with a craft roulette challenge number 240, Swivel Surprise Front and Center card. So last week I did the Swivel Surprise inside the card. This week I moved it onto the front. I'll tell you some tips and tricks and something I want to try with it that might make it work a little bit better. Anyways, I brought in, since this week's parameters were a card for a helper, colors were cereal box, and element was jungle, and random was paper bag. So you see I have a piece of brown paper bag there. I'm going to start by spraying that with some distress sprays, either distress spray stain or distress oxide sprays. Give me some green. I just wanted some green for some leaves that I'm going to cut out and add to the front of my card here. So I kind of brought in my heat tool, moved it around a little bit. You see how it switches there once it's dried, and then I added a little bit of mica spray stain on top of that and some green. You know, maybe I should have waited for that part until after I stamped my leaves, but I didn't. So yeah, there's that. Anyway, so I'm bringing in the lawn fawns. I don't remember which one. They're leaf stencil. This one is more of the jungle leaves or the tropical leaves. Maybe it's tropical leaves stencil set. So it's two stencils, one over the other. And of course, I had to bring in the lighter tone here. So I kept this one very much jungle themed or jungle colored. And of course, when jungle came up and cereal box for color palette, of course I thought of Fruit Loops right away because Toucans and Fruit Loop, and so that was kind of the color palette I was going for. Granted, the Fruit Loop box is red, but I didn't want a red card, so I brought in the red, just not in, you know, the whole card thing. So I'm taking those smaller pieces of the Swivel, or the bigger pieces of the Swivel Surprise, and adding, of course, the same ink blending on them as well, so then they should all cohesively kind of layer together and go together on top of or on the front of my card here. So I wanted to pull this one onto the front because really it's just a pull tab, right? Granted, I was hoping I could maybe like put a guide for my pull tab, but I just don't think it would have worked. I would have needed to have at least a fairly large, you know, movable space on it. So I did fold this. I don't know if I folded it wrong because, you know, I looked at my original, and so I was thinking that it was, because I'm going to end up flipping it upside down so it's facing the other way. And so this is where I'm like, I probably maybe should have done it the other way. Yeah, you see where I'm going with that one? But because, so I ended up folding it the other way, and so I don't know if that hinders my movement on this one at all. We'll see. You know, I have an idea for putting it on the front of a card, but having a little bit more stability there, and then of course using that pull tab kind of like a whole side panel. Does that make sense? Kind of like a gatefold, but not really a gatefold. So maybe just like a little overhang, because I'm thinking if you have an inch overhang, like a flap that kind of wraps around, you could definitely pull it. So I'm thinking like ocean waves or maybe like some clouds, kind of like, I'm trying to think of which card style it is. So I'm just making sure that it's going to work, lining that pull tab up to the end, and then kind of bringing in my pieces here and seeing if they're going to stay on the card once it's all closed. Well, not really closed. I mean, the card's closed, or the front of the card. So once it's, the mechanism is pulled in and out. I'm not worried about that mechanism kind of like escaping the confines of the front of the card when it's opened or pulled. It's more so that it's going to work that way when it's not pulled. So I'm adding in my adhesive here. So if you're interested in how this one actually goes together in general, watch Lawn Fawn's introduction video. They do a way better job than I will do on this one. I just kind of did this from memory, so I was hoping I did it right. But you put adhesive on that little tab there. I do score style tape, and then of course I do liquid glue as well. It is my only point of where it's going to stick onto my card front. So I wanted to make sure that it was well stuck. And then of course I did bring in a second die cut here and made that pull tab a little bit stronger just because it's not going to have anything to hold it in place otherwise, and I wanted to make it a little bit more stable. I should have cut the point. So I didn't cut the point, and that I think maybe would have made it a little bit more stable if I'd have cut, you know, the point in there. So keep that in mind if you're going to recreate this one. So I'm folding that little chair piece. Now, because I like moved this one upside down, and definitely you can flip your card the other way and put it together that way, you know, if that's easier for you, I guess. I don't know. I usually just kind of, you know, roll with the punches. I had my chair, I think I had my chair on wrong, but you know, I also moved this like upside down, and I was unsure of my placements on some of them. It's only the second time I've made this one, and I didn't watch the video this time. I was doing it from memory, which is sketchy at best some days. So, you know, keep that in mind. So I'm going to add some score style tape onto the back of my little chair here, or the seat of my chair, I guess. I don't know. And of course, some liquid glue as well. I do end up pulling off my big circle here. I didn't have it lined up quite right, and it was like off kilter. So the movement on this one, it works. I would definitely say it probably could use a little bit more stability on that piece, and that's why I'm thinking if you do that flap over, I'll do it. I just haven't gotten around to it this week. So I'm thinking if you have like that inch flap overhang, kind of like if you're going to do a gatefold card, like you know, your front gate. So if you would do, I'm thinking it'll work. So I will try it. I'll get back to you. You know how I am. It's, you know, interactive. I have to, it's in my head, so I have to try it. I'll get around to it this week or next, probably, maybe, possibly, hopefully. Anyways, so I removed the one circle, and then I'm putting it back on. So of course that meant, you know, more adhesive, more stuff. So I opened it this time all the way to make sure it was centered a little bit better. My movement was a lot better, you know, for in and out at this point, so I'm happy with it. Now I wish I was better at making that bottom flap instead of putting the circle on there. I think it just has a lot to do with how my image is sitting on there. I could definitely do some, I could have done a leaf on that one instead of that circle, but I was trying to keep it simpler for me overall. Once I get the hang of this one, I have a feeling I'll, you know, play with that a lot more. So now it was time to stamp all of my images. Since I have my card front pretty much done, my mechanism is for the most part done and ready to go. So I just stamped out a whole bunch of the leaves from my Toucan Do It stamp set from Fawn. And then I do have the coordinating dies for this one, which makes it a lot easier. So now I said I should have maybe waited for that mica spray until later because it like stuck to my stamp. I did end up cleaning it and it's mostly off now, but that is something that I would probably avoid doing for next time. So make sure I stamp my images first and then spritz them with the mica spray stain. Because, yeah, or I don't know. I guess maybe it could have done micro glaze over the top, and maybe that would have set it better. I don't know. Anyways, I'm stamping the rest of my images out here. So I wanted to do a bunch of small ones because obviously I need things to move around. And then the toucans, I had decided on 2. I stamped them out multiple times because I wasn't exactly sure layout-wise. So I stamped them a couple of times. And then, of course, the one that was flying, I decided I needed to do one in the other direction. So I brought in my jelly plate. So this is the small one. It works. This is how I do my mirror image stamping. It's the best one that I've had luck-wise so far. So here is my color palette that goes with that Fruit Loop color box. So I kind of pulled, and of course I was going to do my Toucan to match Toucan Sam because, you know, Fruit Loops, hello, and it makes life a little bit easier when you have, you know, a picture to go by or a image to go by. So I'm just bringing in my darker blue, my lighter blue, kind of coloring that through. Well, I guess it's my mid-tone blue because I do end up bringing in a lighter color blue for the face on this one. Now, if I'd have thought about it, I'd have looked a little bit closer and maybe done the yellow before I did the blue and maybe not mixed them on the face. You'll see what I mean in a little bit here. But I also brought in that red for the tail feathers and of course the beak, and then of course there was pink, and then it went to yellow because there's yellow right by the beak on like the face. And so if I'd have paid closer attention, I'd have probably done the yellow and not done the blue right there. So, you know, and then I just brought in some dark grays for the tip of the beak on that one. And then I'm just going to use those same blues, reds, pinks, oranges, and yellows on my flowers and butterflies here. Just going in really quick, keeping my coloring super simple. So I started with the red, went in with the pink, and then of course I'm going to do some, I think I did orange on the tip of my, I can't think of what the flower name is right at the top of my head. It escapes me today. It'll come sooner or later. Anyways, I had die cut all of those out, and then of course I treated some red cardstock here with my anti-static powder tool, and then I'm just going to stamp with the VersaFine or VersaMark ink, and then I will add in some white embossing powder over the top. I usually stamp twice, like if I'm not using my stamping tool. I'll stamp twice in the same one with my stamping tool. But if I'm just free stamping, I usually stamp my sentiment twice. So that way, if one doesn't look as good as the other one, I don't have to start all over again. You know, you're heating it once, you're there anyways. So it's just, to me, it's just faster. And, you know, I'll save the other one because the other one turned out just fine. I'll save the other one and throw it in with my stamp set. So if I make another card that matches that color scheme, I have it. So what a wild ride we're on. So the card for a helper, you know, helping each other out. So it might end up being my anniversary card this coming weekend. We will, I think I have 2 of them for my husband for this weekend. But that was kind of, you know, what a wild ride we're on. So he definitely helps me with all the things. And so he technically counts as my helper this week for my craft roulette card. So I am going to add that circle on. I was thinking about doing the leaf, but because my leaves were brown paper bags, I was afraid that they weren't going to be strong enough for that one, or they might get stuck because they're not exactly flat. So I'm just working my mechanism again, making sure that it's all going to move, and then I can, you know, work on placing my images here. So I'm going to start with my bird that's flying around the one way, and then of course because I did the reverse image, I get to have them going in opposite directions, or they're flying kind of towards each other, kind of sort of, you know what I mean. So one's going one way, one's going the other way, and then just making sure that the bird is kind of placed so he's not like upside down once that mechanism is pulled. And then I'm going to come in and kind of add in the rest. So the butterflies can move which way and that, this way and that way. I wasn't too concerned about them. Or the hibiscus flowers, I figured those were just going to add some pops of color around there so you get, you know, it's not all just greens and blues. I hope that makes sense. And then of course I can add in all of those leaves at this point, and they're all going to kind of move and rotate around, basically just kind of filling in that circle. I wasn't too worried about if they were going to cover up anything once they were open or closed, because as long as they weren't covering the birds, which was my focal point on this one, I wasn't too worried about it. But I love adding the leaves on top. It just adds like another layer of depth to the card front. And then trying to decide where I was going to place my sentiment. So I think I ended up just going on the top because it was the least in the way area on my card. I did think about putting it on that circle, but I had to cut it apart, and then it would have like been kitty wampus, and so I didn't want it to be, you know, I didn't want it to be upside down or sideways. So it ended up on the top of the card there, and then of course just flipping it over and cutting off all of the overhang. Now the one leaf that was overhanging that is on the circle is kind of gonna, you know, it'll work its way around. It's just bent over, okay? That's what we're going with there. Plus, this way it doesn't cover up my bird when the bird is, you know, moved around. Otherwise, I think it would have covered up my bird. So, therefore, once I was done with that, I could add that onto my card base here. But before I do that, I'm going to add my sentiment on the inside. And so, for this one, I just opted to go with I'm so glad it's with you. So it kind of pulls that one in. And then, because I still have some leftover pieces from the front of my card that I didn't end up using, I'm going to pull those in and add them onto the inside. This pulls the inside, or the outside, into the inside of the card and just kind of, you know, works with it. So, I don't like writing in cards, so this kind of limits my space. Yeah. Hot tip. That's my hot tip. Make your inside of your cards pretty so you don't have as much room to write in. So there I am just adding it with some glue on to the front, and there is my completed card. So it doesn't move as easily as I had hoped it would, but it moves, I mean, it moves out easy. It's the in part that's not, and I think that's just because of how I have my mechanism put together. But, you know, there it is. So you can use that swivel surprise onto the front of your card, and it's just kind of a cool little feature there. So for my craft roulette parameters, so a card for a helper, which would be my husband, and then of course the cereal box of Fruit Loops, which also inspired the toucans, and of course that jungle theme, and then of course, well, the jungle for my element, and that brown paper bags on those leaves. So, you know, for added depth and dimension. I hope you go check out Craft Roulette live, and, you know, I'll be back hopefully next week with another one. Bye!